Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Welcome to the Happy Hour Garage, featuring a duo of racing gals who live for the thunder of horsepower, the smell of high-octane fuel, and burning rubber at 200 miles an hour. They believe a day at the Speedway is like a day at the spa. Together, they bring you NASCAR news and interviews and get you ready for the races each week. And now, here's your hosts, Shannon Yoakum and Maureen Kelly from the Happy Hour Garage.
Gentlemen, start your engine.
Hey, welcome to the Saturday afternoon edition of the Happy Hour Garage. I'm your host, Shannon Yoakum. I'm sitting here in the beautiful sunshine of British Columbia, Canada, and you'll probably hear the birds chirping in the background, but I'm not shutting my window. It's just way too nice outside. It was a great day. Spent a great day out in my garden, got a bit of sunburn and a whole bunch of mosquito bites, which we don't even have mosquitoes up here usually, so that's kind of strange. But anyway, it was a good day, and I am joined by my very rainy co-host from Pennsylvania, Maureen Kelly. You grow some web feet there, Maureen?
Yeah, well now, tonight, but it's good because the rain held off here. Today I went with my sister to a giant flea market, and there's nothing more fun than those,
Mm-hmm.
And got a bunch of neat things and, little trinkets that I can make something from. But so I got home, and then the race started, and I kept everybody updated, as you know, online, watching for the storms to hit again.
Yeah, because you're very close to Dover there.
Very close. And, the storms held off till about 20 minutes after the end of that race. So it all works out. They're here tonight. The storms are with me now, and they'll be out of here by about 2 in the morning.
Well, I hope you maintain power throughout the show, and if we lose you, I'm sorry, phone back in. We're also joined tonight by Buddy, our PR guy, also a storm guy. You guys are all, and our guest, which I'll introduce in a minute, also a storm girl. So, Buddy, how you doing? You got power and everything?
Oh, yeah, all ours came through last night. I'm just looking forward to talking with our guest tonight. She's going to be a guest of Ed's at Pat Rogers Harley Davidson.
Oh, good.
On the 27th, and
That's
just can't wait to get to it.
Oh, that we had Ed Hines on the other night, and I've been to Charlotte and I've been to Pat Rogers Harley Davidson there, and man, that is quite a fun event, and Ed's made it so incredible. I wish we were going this year. We're planning, the three of us, to meet up there next year in Charlotte, and we're gonna pay a little visit to our guest as well. She doesn't know that yet, but I guess she does now. But
now she does.
Well, tonight we have a guest that combines two of my most favorite things in life. So, what are they? What do you think they are, girls and boys?
Well, we know one is wine.
And what's the other thing, buddy?
Racing.
Exactly. So we've got the wife on tonight of one of my very favorite race car drivers and broadcasters of all time, the owner of Rendezvous Ridge Winery and silver medal winner for their wines and Women in Wines. I'd like you to give a warm welcome, please, to Terri Parsons, the wife of my beloved Benny Parsons, who left us way too soon in 07 from that evil monster cancer. Terri, thank you for coming on our show. I can hardly wait to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I've looked forward to this all week.
Oh, wine and racing to me go hand in hand, and I've always been, well, I'm kind of famous. I live between two vineyards. I mean, what can I say?
Well, I think wine and racing must have evidently been Benny's two things that went together, too, because it was his idea to get started on the vineyard after he sat in a rain delay talking to Richard Childress. He came home and announced to me that we were building a house in a vineyard on land he had owned and lived on when he was a child. So you're talking to somebody that knew nothing about wine back in 2007. I can pretty much carry my own by now. So.
Oh, I bet you can. You've operated that. I mean, he never got to see the vines planted, did he?
No, though he ordered them, and he worked with our wine, with the gentleman that made our wine for us, who I don't know whether he picked him because he selected our winemaker because he had been the winemaker for Bill Clinton when he was the president of the United States,
Wow.
or whether he picked him because he had been a race fan since 1968.
Or both.
Or both. You know, it's kind of good to have somebody that knows something about wine, because Benny and I certainly didn't. We could just tell you if we liked it or not.
You know, I was at the Las Vegas children's charity auction, and it was just after Benny passed away, and there was a set of his your I guess wine there in a box set, and I wanted that so bad. Do you know who outbid me on that?
Who?
Carol Shelby. Son of a, you
he
know
was
what?
been a friend of ours for years.
Oh, it's like, man, you got all the money in the world. Back away. This is something I want. Nope, he had to have it. I would have never got it across the border probably anyway, but I really wanted it as a memento of Benny, who I absolutely loved. You know,
we had a lot of Canadian race fans that would come into the wine tasting room. One thing that Benny wanted, and back then it was very unheard of, was he wanted to take the snobbery out of wine. He didn't want people to feel like they had to take a test when they came in to the wine tasting room. They didn't have to smell it and know what the aromas were and what, you know, all of that was.
Yep.
He wanted race fans to be able to come in here in shorts and sit down in a wine tasting room that was really a racing museum. The whole wine tasting room is a racing museum.
That's my personal heaven right there.
Yeah. How cool is that?
And people absolutely loved it, and they liked going through it. And if I was here, I would give the tours myself. If not, I had two girls that were my managers here that could give a better tour than I could. They had been race fans since they were little kids through their fathers, so it worked out pretty well. And my wine tasting room manager came from California and had worked in wine tasting rooms out there her whole life. So but just, you know, God takes care of idiots whenever you need it. And he certainly brought them into my life in a rush.
Oh my goodness! Well, you guys are being very successful, and it's so cool that you've got that for yourself. You know, I imagine after Benny passed away, you needed something to keep you busy, I would think.
You're exactly right. I think that for me, that was my. Instead of going to a counselor and having to go through all of that, because it was such a big loss, and I was just in a fog for the first 5 years that he had been gone. I'll just be honest with you. And if it hadn't been for that wine tasting room and me giving tours and talking to the people and hearing their stories about how they met him at a racetrack or how they went to high school with him, and listening to their stories did me more good than my stories did them. And I know that's what got me through it. I do.
I don't think they probably think that, but yeah, that's so true though. You know, they loved him totally, the fans do. And I really hope, and I know everybody in listening to this show hopes that this is the year Benny gets into the Hall of Fame, because I know I know he's in a bunch of Hall of Fames already, and but this is the big one, and this is our Hall of Fame, and God, I hope he gets in there.
I do too. I've certainly heard from a lot of fans and a lot of press people, and you know, every year I go and sit for the announcements, and every year, you know, and it's not that our friends aren't getting into the Hall of Fame, because all these people that are in the Hall of Fame before Benny would not have a problem with waiting his turn to get in.
No.
And but every year it gets a little harder to look happy when you walk out of there. So I certainly hope this is his year too. So we'll see.
Well, you know, how ironic would it be? I was just thinking this when I was going through some of you know, the stories about Benny's life. How ironic would it be if he and Henry Hyde go in together this year?
I've thought about that myself. I've thought about that myself. Most people don't realize that in the movie Days of Thunder, there's a scene in there where the crew chief is in the pits, and of course Tom Cruise is out on the track, and he's yelling that he's going to come in and pit. and the crew chief says, "Don't pit now, we're eating ice cream cones."
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that was a true story that happened to Benny and Harry Hyde. and that's where that came from in that movie.
Buffet Benny, right?
Great. Wouldn't that be neat? It would be really neat. I think a lot of people are working in the different NASCAR groups, pushing very hard this year for Benny's.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. I've heard from more of the people that were in racing with Benny this year than I ever have before. Facebook, I'm on there all the time posting pictures, and the unique thing that I've found is with friends, and a lot of them are race fans. If I post just a regular ballot, to click on the ballot to vote for people, I don't get as many responses as I do if I post a personal picture of something that happened in Benny's life or happened with our life together, or something funny that they remembered him by. Then all of a sudden it lights up and hundreds of people come on there sharing it with other people. So I've been trying to do that daily now, is come up with some pictures that people have never seen before that they might like to see or didn't know about. And that seems to be helping a great deal fan vote-wise.
How did you two meet?
How did we meet? Well, this is a good story. There's a big age difference between Benny and myself. There's a 13-year age difference between us. And I had been out of college about a year and a half and became director of tourism for Daytona Beach, because that's where I'm born and raised. And I worked for the Chamber of Commerce. My job was to get people to want to come there, not only to go to the beach, but to come to the Daytona 500, and back then the July race, and help the Speedway get people to want to come stay in hotel rooms. And so part of my job was to call all these race car drivers every year, especially for the Daytona 500 in February, and invite them to a Chamber of Commerce breakfast that the Chamber did every year. And back then, they didn't have secretaries. They didn't have 500 employees. These guys answered the phone themselves. So I'm sure, and Benny is sure, that I talked to him at some point, and this went on I was there 10 years before I took a promotion and went on up the ladder to work for the governor's office. But we're sure we talked to each other. We're sure we met each other. We had to. But I didn't remember him, and I'm embarrassed to tell you that I wasn't a race fan back then. My father was a huge race fan.
We forgive
I
you.
was not. I was a majorette in the high school band. We went out every year, played for the opening of the race, and they gave us the choice of either staying for the race or going home. And I always called my father to come get me. and I mean, that's just the truth. So we're sure we knew each other or had met each other back then. But then I didn't really meet him again until I became CEO of the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Richmond, Virginia, and was the film commissioner for the governor's office there. And I went to the Grand Marshal's dinner for the Richmond International Raceway, and ended up sitting next to Benny. And then he kept looking at me saying, "I know you." And anybody that knows Benny knows there's two things he never forgets. That's a face and a phone number. If you ever gave him a phone number, I guarantee you he could recite it back to you 20 years later. He just had this uncanniness with phone numbers. Well, he didn't know my phone number, but he knew my face. And he said, "I've met you before. Where have I met you before?" And we figured out it was from Daytona Beach and from back then in the 70s. And so that's how we met, was really in Daytona Beach, and then again in Richmond, Virginia.
Where was your first date?
In Richmond, yeah. He had lost his wife a couple of years earlier, and I did not know that. I did not know he had lost his wife because, like I said, I wasn't really a race fan. And he followed me to the parking lot, and I was insulted because I thought, people would think I was dating a married man or whatever.
No.
and then I felt bad when I found out that he had lost his wife. And about 6 months after that, we started dating. And at that point, I guess, and I understand it now, having gone through a death of a spouse myself, but he had it in his mind that he was in a hurry. I mean, he was just in a hurry to get married because he had never been by himself before. He married his high school sweetheart. They had 2 great sons, my stepsons, and I guess he thought, he realized after losing her that life is so fleeting and it goes by so fast. So we dated for about a year before we got married, and women tend to think that Benny was this undying romantic, and I'll tell you how romantic he was. We were sitting in between 6 lanes of traffic, and he looked at me in the car and he said, "So you want to go look at engagement rings or what?" So when I got home, he called his mother, of course, to tell her that he had asked me to marry him, and she said, "Put her on the phone." So I got on the phone with his mother, who has been, Benny and I were married 24 years. His mother was one of my best friends. And not many people can say that about a mother-in-law,
No.
but she was great. She'd keep all of her daughter-in-laws and get rid of all of her sons before she'd get rid of the daughter-in-laws. And she said, "You make him get down on one knee and propose to you the proper way." I didn't raise him that way. And I said, you tell him. So she did, and he did.
Oh, God, that's a great story. How did you, you must have, obviously he's involved in racing, so you're going to races to hang out with him, or how did that all work out?
After we got married, yeah. Well, even before we got married, I was going to different racetracks with him and everything to go up and down pit road, and I met quite a few people. But the odd thing about it was, growing up in Daytona Beach, I knew a lot of racing people, but I knew them differently. For instance, I grew up with Fireball Roberts' daughter. His daughter and I took tap dancing lessons together. I grew up with Smokey Unick's daughter. We went to high school. God, we went through elementary school together. So I knew them all personally. I didn't really understand what they did for a living. I thought Smokey Unick just ran a garage. I didn't realize that this man was a genius and what all he had contributed to racing. So I knew a lot of people in racing, but I knew them differently than Benny did. I mean, he knew them a whole lot better than I did, but I knew them professionally. And so we would go to racetracks, and I would know a lot of people, and then got to know a lot of people better and on the other side of it after we got married. But we got the Sawyers had owned Richmond Raceway at the time, and Bill Sawyer came to me and he said, "Terri, listen, you all get married on the start-finish line, would you, at the racetrack?" And I said, "Are you out of your mind?" That's where I draw the line. No. So we had this big discussion about how we were going to get married. Well, Benny's family was noted for every time there was a race in North Wilkesboro. His family, being as he was from here and lived in the middle of nowhere when he did live here, that every year they would have a big family cookout. They'd invite all the drivers and their wives and PR people and the press and people like that. And it would probably be about 300-400 people. And this was a tradition his family had carried on for years. So Benny and I discussed it, and I said, "Look, we both have been married before. Let's don't do a big wedding and do all this kind of stuff. Why don't we get married at the cookout? My family's coming up from Florida. They think to meet your family. So let's just get married at the cookout and not tell anybody. Don't tell a soul." And he had gone to school with a lady that was a magistrate now and still is. And he said, I'll only tell her because we have to get a marriage license and all of that. And we did that. We surprised everybody at this cookout and got married in the middle of nowhere on a rainy night, and all the moonshiners showed up with trunkfuls of moonshine. And when nobody had to dress up, nobody had to bring a gift, and everybody was there that he raced with, and everybody was there that he worked with on television, and it was just a nice way of getting married, and no fuss, no muss.
I like the moonshine thing. When I was writing my intro to you, I thought about saying something of along the lines of, instead of talking about moonshine, we're going to talk about wine.
Well, we can talk about moonshine because this would be Benny's, one of his biggest surprises, I think, is that my background, like I said, is tourism. So Benny had left me a list of 10 things to get done for him in case he did not pull through the cancer. And one of it was getting involved with the Chamber of Commerce and trying to help them with tourism events and things. And so from my background, I know you have to go back. The town that you live in should promote whatever your history is. And whether you like its history or not, that's your history. You can't rewrite history. And the only person I knew when I moved up here in this house, because like you said in your intro, Benny had already passed away at that point in time. The only person I knew was Junior Johnson and his wife, Lisa. So I went to Junior Johnson and I said, Junior, I want to do a moonshiner and revenuers reunion. And he just about spit his coffee across the room. And he said, Terry, honey, we haven't talked to the revenuers. We still don't talk to the revenuers. There isn't anybody in this town that's going to let you do this, and they're going to put you on a slow boat right back to Florida. And I said, how about if I can get the sheriff and both police chiefs to sign off on this? Would you help me get the moonshiners together? And I'll find the revenuers. You don't have to talk to them. We'll put you at different ends of the stage. We'll bring in announcers from ESPN and from NBC and Fox to do the questions and answers. You'll know the questions beforehand so you all can answer the questions. And we'll auction off the rocking chairs that you sit in, and you autograph them, and we'll auction it off to Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, because it was not our intent to teach people how to make moonshine. It was all about how NASCAR and racing got started. And he said, if you can do that, I'll help you. So I went and talked to all the different police chiefs, and there's two here, North Wilkesboro and Wilkesboro, and then the sheriff, of course, of Wilkes County. And they said, fine, we can't stop you from having a party on the land that you own. And we own over 200 acres up here. And so Junior and I made this by invitation only. Only he and I could invite people. There were no invitations. You had to know a secret phrase. And every year we changed the phrase. Like the first time was, I see the moon and the moon sees me. If you didn't know that phrase when you got here, you did not get in. And we had all the police and deputies and all the off-duty officers dressed up like moonshiners. And they were, of course, our security for the night. And we had a parade that came up from Charlotte, antique cars. A lot of the drivers owned antique cars, 1940 Fords, and they drove a little parade up here and parked their cars. And it was just for people only. It wasn't open to the public. It was only racing people, past and present. And for a lot of people, a lot of the drivers had not seen each other in years. And we had the absolute best time. And the next year it grew from 100 people to 300. And then the last year we had it, it went to 450. Junior was up here a month ago shooting a TV show for ESPN. And he said, when are we going to do this thing again? And I said, wait a minute, I thought you didn't like doing this. And he said, well, it was fun the way we did it. So that we got to ask him questions about how moonshining began, how racing began. We asked him questions nobody else had ever asked him before, and absolutely had a ball. And the biggest problem was we could not get the drivers and the moonshiners and the revenuers to leave after the thing was over with. They all wanted to sit around and talk. So but it's funny, Benny would never believe in a million years that I would come up here and get moonshiners and revenuers that hadn't talked together in 50 years to sit down and actually talk, but they did.
Wow.
To be a fly on the wall for something like that, really.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, they loved it. Went to the Charlotte. It was always on the Tuesday before the Charlotte race in October. And after the first one, I walked down the garage area after the following day. And I cannot tell you how many people were running up to me saying, how do we get on this list to come to this thing next year? And I said, well, you got to talk to Junior. I mean, if he says you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. And so it got to be the social event of Wilkes County was the Moonshiner and Revenuers reunion.
Oh, God. What a great story that is. I mean,
it was fun, but I knew nothing about moonshine, and so it was easy for us to come up with questions to ask because none of us knew anything about it. So,
yeah, well, I can relate to that. I'm learning that through the show. I mean, lots of people we talk to, they talk about moonshine, and Junior Johnson is my hero. I mean, someday I'm going to get him on here. I've met him and hung out with him a little bit at Charlotte.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, they gave me sweet passes, and him and I just had a ball. You know,
he's a great guy. I don't know what I would have done when I first moved up here without Junior and Lisa. They were just so kind to me. I can't begin to tell you. And they lived on one end of the county, and I lived on the end of the county that's closest to Boone. And well, I went back with those signatures from the police chiefs, and I said, okay, here it is. He was totally surprised, and he was famous for having breakfast every morning.
Yes.
He cooked breakfast for his farm hands and for people that were just driving by, actually.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so when I walked back in with those papers signed and saying they would not hold them harmless, for that the statute of limitations had run out, nobody was going to get arrested for anything they said, and all of this, I said, help me find the moonshiners. And he said, Terry, look around this table. And I looked around the table, and he said, meet my moonshiners. And they had been sitting there the whole time. The whole time. They were waiting on me to see if I was going to come back or not.
Sounded like they accepted you with open arms, which, in the racing community, that's a little tough.
No, you're in a very small town where rumors go around town in about 15 minutes. That same night, I was scheduled to be a guest speaker for a Kiwanis club here in town. And it's one of the largest men's club. I mean, it was all men. I think maybe there was one woman that was a member. But there was about 300 people there. And they wanted to talk to me about how to start a vineyard like I knew. I mean, I had just moved here in a week, and I was trying to figure it out myself. But they wanted me to tell them how to do this. So I thought that was hysterical. And Mike Staley, whose father used to own the Speedway, was the president of the club at the time, and he had asked me to be a speaker. So, of course, I wasn't going to tell him no. But I got up there. They wanted to ask me questions like how to do a Benny meet and, what's the thing that people that about Benny that most people wouldn't know and things like this. And there was this old man that was in the back of the room, and he raised his hand up, and he said, I heard you had breakfast with Junior Johnson at 6 o'clock this morning, and you want to have a Moonshiner and Revenuers reunion. And with that, the room gasped. I mean, just gasped. And he said, anybody helping you find the Revenuers? And I said, no, sir. He said, I'm the oldest Revenuer in the county, and I was the head of the Revenuers here. And I am 91 years old. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Let's get this thing done. And he helped me get the Revenuers, and we had 12 Revenuers and 12 Moonshiners. Oh. So within one day, it all came together just because this is such a small town, and rumors get around real fast.
It probably had Benny's hand in it, too, though.
I think so.
I'm sure.
I think there's a lot of things that have happened since I've been here that Benny definitely had a hand in.
And people don't really associate Benny with moonshine running. That's not one of his...
Well, he never did that. He never ran.
He was a taxi cab driver, right? I mean...
Well, he wasn't even a taxi cab driver, and that's how you can tell who Benny's real friends are. Even though on his Wheaties boxes says he was a taxi cab driver.
He really wasn't.
His father owned cab companies in Detroit. Benny worked as a mechanic on those cars. He never drove a cab.
See, there you go.
And we went up for Thanksgiving one year before his parents moved back to North Carolina. And he told his dad, he said, I'm tired of living this lie. I have got to go drive a cab. So he got in, he left the house and he went down to the cab company and took some lady somewhere, and he came back to the house and he said, God, now I feel better. I've been living this lie for so many years, and it all started with a PR director for for one of the race teams that said, well, Benny, the cab driver sounds like a much better story than his dad owned the cab company.
Well, and I know he owned the cab company, but I didn't realize that they had PR'd that into that. That's amazing.
No,
story.
The PR director was working for the race team that Benny was racing for.
Right.
And so they had decided he was going to be this cab driver. And so anyway, Benny did go out and take this lady back to the house or wherever she went. And he came back to dinner, and his dad said, "Where's the money?" And Benny said, "Oh my God, I forgot to drop the flag." And he said, "You're still not a cab driver from Detroit."
And he also was in a lot of movies. I think 14 or so.
Yes, he was.
Talladega Nights, of course, is he was
Talladega Nights, of course. Yeah. And then he was in Herbie Fully Loaded, I think, was the cutest movie he was in.
I saw that.
And,
that was adorable.
Yeah, and it's one night this week, both of them were on at the same time on different channels, so they're still running these movies like crazy.
Oh, race fans love that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then he was in a movie called Stroker Ace with Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson.
Yep. I remember that one.
And here's another odd thing. I was the film commissioner on that movie because it was filmed in Daytona Beach. Benny was in that movie, but I never saw him, and we still didn't know each other. So many times our paths had crossed, but we still didn't know each other. It's just weird how those things happen.
That's a true love story, and my husband and I went through exactly the same thing. It was years.
Timing wasn't right.
It was years. Yeah, I wasn't ready. Yeah. Or he wasn't ready. Whatever.
Yeah, the time
wasn't right.
Timing wasn't right. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, it had to be pretty hard going through the whole cancer thing. I've been through it. We all have. So
oh my God.
I know that Benny, didn't really believe that he had cancer.
No.
Tell us about that if you can.
Oh, sure. If he was here today, he'd tell you he did not die of cancer. And on his death certificate, it said he was 100% cancer-free, that there was no cancer in his body. What he died of was over-aggressive radiation to both lungs, and both lungs hardened. And that's what he died of, over-aggressive radiation. And in November, he was diagnosed on his birthday, of all things.
Oh, God.
July 12th, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and it was already in stage 4. So we knew it was going to be an uphill battle, and thanks to Rick Hendrick, he had gone through similar situation, and he knew the best cancer doctor there in Charlotte. Dr. Stephen Limentani was his name, but yeah, as soon as he was diagnosed by our family doctor with stage 4 lung cancer, first thing out of my mouth was call Rick. So he called Rick, and Rick got him in to see Dr. Limentani. He came through the cancer treatments and went through chemotherapy better than anybody I had ever seen. I mean, he was bound and determined he was going to finish his contract out with NBC. He carried oxygen tanks with him everywhere he went. I went with him, and he carried them in the car in the back. We were going to be like the space shuttle if we ever got hit from behind. But yeah, that was hard. Probably the blessing in disguise was he did not suffer with cancer. A lot of people go through this for years. Benny was diagnosed in July, and he died the following January. He collapsed on Christmas Day at the top of our stairs. We were on the way up here to see his mother for spend Christmas Day with his mom. And he had just gotten out of the shower, and he walked to the door, and he said to me, "Call Mom and tell her we can't come up there today. I don't feel too good." And he collapsed at the top of the stairs, called an ambulance, and he never came back out of the hospital.
Mm.
But
my heart breaks for you.
He said, well, there's a lot of people that my heart breaks for. I mean, it was rough on a lot of people. But in the hospital, he said to me, "Don't you ever let anybody tell you I died of lung cancer. I did not get cancer from smoking." Because the first thing people thought of was, my gosh, he raced for Copenhagen Skull all those years, and it was Winston Cup racing.
Right.
So naturally, they want to blame cigarettes.
Of course.
Well, he quit smoking when he was 27 years old. He said, however, I never quit blowing asbestos off of brakes. So he was convinced that he died of lung cancer from blowing the asbestos off of brakes off of cars he was working on.
And who knows, maybe he did.
Yeah, I mean, he just had that in his head, and he said, I don't care what anybody tells you. And then when I got that death certificate in the mail, and it said 100% cancer-free, how else do you believe that? I mean, it looked like it had a lot of merit to it.
Did you frame that?
Oh, God, no. No. Didn't want to look at that. That was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
I bet it was. We've all had buddies had cancer. We've been through it with him, so we totally know. And my own mom went through exactly the same thing that Benny did, exactly the same thing, except she wasn't blowing asbestos brake dust. But she'd quit smoking when she was in her 20s and ended up dying of lung cancer.
Exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it touches everybody. It's terrible. It's really.
It sure does. I've heard more stories since losing him that were just so similar that it's just absolutely amazing.
Does that give you any comfort?
No, I think it just makes me more sympathetic towards the people that are going through it. It's the old adage, you think you know what people are going through until it happens to you. And I thought I knew what my friends had gone through whenever they had lost husbands and things. I had no idea. No idea whatsoever.
You really don't till you go through it.
And I think it makes it worse when you're in the public eye, and I was never the one in the public eye. Benny was. And I tried to stay out of the public eye because I'm one of these, or maybe I'm nuts, I don't know, but I'm one of these people that people don't pay to go see the wives, I don't think. I think they go there to see the drivers, to see the personalities on TV, to get their autographs. And they're not there really to see the families. Occasionally, that's great, but I tried to stay out of the public eye. The biggest problem that people are having now are finding pictures of Benny and I together, because I was always the one taking the pictures of Benny with somebody else. And
they're hard to find.
Yeah, they're very hard.
Buddy found one. It was like, yes, way to go, Buddy, because that's the one we're going to use to promote the show.
Gosh.
They are hard to find, and like so many wives, I think one of the only wives that is really public is Delana Harvick. She's out there.
Yeah.
She's out there.
And Samantha Bush. I mean, now it's completely. You got to remember that was long ago, and they're in the present now. So everything has changed now, complete from what he went through. And me being the second wife. His first wife, Connie, is the one that deserves the credit. She was bringing kids up in the back seat of a car. They didn't have motorhomes back then, and nannies and MRO that watched out the kids. She was like Linda Petty and the rest of them, and Judy Allison. Bringing kids up on pit road was hard. They brought them up pretty much by themselves because their husbands were always racing, so they were the ones going to the ball games and trying to keep the home life going. And I have nothing but respect for her. I did not come along until Benny went into the TV end of it all. So, and that's good for me because I had a TV and movie background, so at least I knew more about his profession than I did the first one.
Terry, when he won that, when the ESPN, the Emmy he won that year, was that like 95 or 96? How proud was he of that? I remember when that happened, and I was thinking to myself, boy, it couldn't happen to a better analyst for the Emmy. Yeah.
For his Emmy? Oh, my gosh,
Yep.
yes. And then the Myers Brothers Award was another big one. That was the only thing that he had to miss, was receiving the Myers Brothers Award for a lifetime achievement in NASCAR. And that was given out at the NASCAR banquet, and he was too sick at that point in time. He was in the hospital. And that meant an awful lot to him. But, yeah, his Emmy for ESPN and then his work with NBC. He loved every job he ever had. He told me before we got married, he said, let me tell you my motto in life. And I said, okay. He said, if it isn't fun, I'm not going to do it. And I said, great. Can that work for me too? And he said, sure.
That's a good attitude.
And I really think the thing that would amaze people the most about, well, there's a few things, but the thing that would surprise people the most would be the fans that Benny had, little girls between the ages of 9 and 13. They had to bring somebody with a profession that they wanted to be like. And she had chosen Benny. And, of course, she didn't have any money, so she wasn't going to pay his way there. She wanted him to come to Pennsylvania, and we were living in Charlotte at the time, to be her show and tell. And he did it. He flew himself to Pennsylvania and went with her to her class that day. And everybody was totally shocked when he walked in. And he said, that's one of the best things I ever did. Well, it didn't take long for that to get around. And then, of course, every kid, within 50 states was writing him letters, wanting him to go to the prom, wanting him to go. I mean, it was hysterical, the things they wanted. And he did as much as he could. He hated to tell anybody no.
But he had such a remarkable life, remarkable career. Not only, for me, I don't remember much of his time on the track, to be honest. I'm in my later 50s. But, what I do remember is him as a broadcaster. And I just loved him as a broadcaster. He just looked... He
loved doing that.
He was so human, and he would get down there, and instead of just, before Benny, it was more of just analyst who didn't come up through the sport. Yeah. And then there was Benny. And boy, he could just tell you so much about it. I learned so much.
Well, I think he had a lot of practice with me because, like I said, I was not a big race fan on the inside of the track. And I knew nothing about nothing. So I was always asking him questions. So when he said a lot of times whenever he'd get on TV and have to answer a question, they had a segment where people could write in and ask him things. He said, I always pretended I was answering the question to you because I knew you didn't know the first thing about it, so I had to start at ground zero.
And that's a good way to go, right?
Yeah. And I had never heard a lot of his old stories about his racing days, so he had a clean slate with me. I mean, he could tell me anything. I had never heard it before, where the rest of his family had all heard the same story at least 20 times. So,
well, him and Ned Jarrett were just gold together. I mean, we interviewed Ned Jarrett, and he had nothing but good stuff to say about Benny. I mean, we talked about Benny quite extensively, actually.
Well, the truly, I don't know how odd it is nowadays because I really don't know, but the guys that you saw in the booth with Benny, I don't care if it was ESPN, NBC, whatever channel he was on, those guys were friends on TV and off TV. And the biggest day they had off was Tuesday. I guarantee you they were together on that Tuesday. We either ate dinner with their families, or Benny golfed with them, or he even flew some of them with him to Ireland golfing. He took Alan Bestwick with him golfing to Ireland. So they were very, very close friends. He told me when he proposed to me, he said, now, I may have to take this proposal back. And I said, what? He said, I've got to run this by Bob Jenkins. He's my best friend. If he doesn't like you, you're out of the picture. So, every time Bob and I see each other, I said, gee, I'm lucky that you liked me. That's all I can say. But they were all true friends. They stuck up for each other. They were together constantly. And I hope it's the same way now with the guys that you see in the booth. But you could tell on TV when Benny and them that they were indeed true friends by the way they could kid each other and the things they could get away with.
Oh yeah, it's clear.
Nobody's feelings got hurt. Nobody's.
It's clearly evident, if you look back on the videos, and of course he's got Greg Biffle. I mean, there was a lot of publicity about Greg is he was devastated when Benny died. How did Greg Biffle approach you?
Yeah, I got custody of Greg after Benny died. Greg and I were talking about this a few months ago. He was up here doing an appearance for a fundraiser that Benny did for underprivileged kids. So Greg has taken it over now. And I said, Greg, I feel like I got custody of you when Benny died. And he said, Terry, I do too. He said, when I want somebody to talk to, I'll just pick up the phone and call you. I said, I've noticed. So
that's about the biggest compliment you can get.
Yeah, well, Greg's a sweet guy.
No, but I mean, the racing community just took you under their arms, and you're one of them.
Yeah, I'm still up here in Wilkes County being known as the new wife. But though Benny and I were married 24 years, so I'm still called the new wife up here. And I find that funny. But yeah, I was lucky. Became very, very close to Bobby and Judy Allison. The day that I had to move in up here, they knew how hard it was going to be, and I pulled up in my car and sat in the driveway waiting for the building inspector to come out and let me in because Benny had already sold our house in Charlotte, and I had no place to go. So I sat in the car and waited for the building inspector to come out and came in the house with our dog and looked up, and Bobby and Judy Allison were knocking on the back door. And I went to the door and I said, how in the world, I mean, if you could see where I live, you know why I'm saying this. I said, how in the world did you find me? And I said, Bobby, I thought you lost your memory from, year 1981 to 88. He said, Terry, I didn't lose my memory how to get back to a good party. I remember how to get back to these parties up here. And he and Judy became two of my very best friends. The first time, I dodged the press forever. They kept calling, wanting to do interviews, both newspapers and magazines and television. And I kept telling them all no. And finally, one magazine had called, and for some reason, they knew that Judy and I were friends, and they called Judy. And they said, how do we get her to do this? And Judy said, let me do it. So Judy called me, and she said, look, I've lost 2 kids. If I can sit and do an interview with a magazine, so can you. And I will come up there and sit on the sofa with you and hold your hand. And we'll cry together. We'll take breaks. We'll do whatever we have to do. But you got to do your first one in order to do the second. And she did. She came up here and sat on the couch with me and held my hand. And we cried and we'd stop and we'd cry and we'd stop. And if it hadn't been for Bobby and Judy Allison, they gave me a lot of strength I found in them.
Wow. And how were you when Judy passed? Did you...
It was pretty bad. I was text messaging her daughter back and forth. I had just talked to Judy the night before she died. And I said, I'll give you a couple of days recovery and then I'll come to see you. And she said, okay. And she said, I'll have Bonnie keep you updated. And we text message back all day long, and she's in recovery. They said she's doing fine. And then all of a sudden the tone changed. And it said, they just took her back in. I will let you know what's going on in a minute. And then an hour and a half passed, and I didn't hear a thing. And I said, Bonnie, what's going on? And she wrote back, not good.
Oh.
And I waited a while. What does not good mean? And didn't hear anything back from her. And then she called. And she said, I couldn't write this. And she said, Terri, Mom's gone.
Oh,
And it was
heartbreaking.
devastating. And I knew exactly how Bobby felt. Benny was my world, and Judy was his world. And I know exactly how he felt. He knew I knew how he felt. And
did you reach out to him?
Oh yeah. He came up here and did the same. He did a golf tournament in Benny's name here a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him then how he was doing, and he said, like you told me it was going to be, good days and bad days, one day at a time.
It is.
But
hard to
he's
lose
staying
his
very busy, and I think that's the best thing for him.
You got to keep busy. Yeah.
That's the key to it. That's the key to it.
Yeah, it is very hard, and we actually interviewed him recently, and Judy came up and in the conversation, and he brought it up.
He did, yeah.
And he just abruptly left. Right in the middle of the interview. It obviously too tough for him, and I really, my heart just broke for him because, I went through that with my dad. I understand that.
Yeah, we weren't going there. He's the one that went there, though. We weren't going there in our interview.
Yeah.
We had predetermined
and I can tell you why. I can tell you why, and I'm sure you can too because you've been through this. People assume when you lose somebody that you love that don't bring the subject up because it's going to make them cry or it's going to make them feel bad. When you lose somebody that you love, as much as he loved Judy, as much as I love Benny, as much as I'm sure you loved your loved one, all you want to do is talk about them.
Yep.
All you want to do is remember the things that they did. All you want to do is talk about them. And it's like all of a sudden nobody's talking about them, and you think in your mind you're feeling like everybody forgot them already.
It's one of the biggest myths that people don't understand when somebody dies, is you do want to talk about them.
That's all you want to do.
That's why I was glad you came on, because we all loved Benny, and all our listeners loved Benny. We want to talk about Benny. And
I have no problem talking about him. I mean,
and I'm so happy that you're here.
He was a great husband. He was a great father. He was a great grandfather. The youngest granddaughter, she was about 7 months old when he died, so she doesn't remember him. But Emily, through the oldest granddaughter, Emily, who just, I understand, is now got her driver's permit, which would scare Benny to death. He'd be out trying to teach her how to drive, which would scare us all. But Emily remembers him, and through Emily, she's telling her sister stories, and that's the best thing. And,
sure. The family stories mean a lot. You can't let those stories go.
Yeah, they do.
I'm Irish. We capitalize on.
Oh yeah. Maureen
family
holds
stories
breaks for days.
Well, Benny comes from a very, very good, very large family.
Yeah.
Up here, I'm known as the Stepford wife because the highway 421 on this end is called Benny Parsons Highway. When you get to where you're coming up through where I live, you're in a town called Parsonsville. When you turn on the road coming up towards me, it's Parsonsville Road. When you get to my road, you turn on Benny Parsons Road. So, believe me, up here, I'm known as the Stepford wife. There isn't anything that's not named after him up here.
Oh, gosh. Is that tough for you, after being married so long that, yet, you're obviously accepted in the NASCAR community? So
without the NASCAR people, I don't know what I would do. We were right in the beginning when you said they accepted me with open arms. I mean, it was hard back then. They weren't as gracious with second wives as they are today. But once they got to know me, it took a while for people to get to know me a little bit. And like I said, some of them I knew just from having to call them each year to get them to come to breakfast and stuff, and some of them I knew their wives better than them. They were very, very nice to me.
Having Junior Johnson in your corner probably didn't hurt.
Well, Martha Jarrett, Ned Jarrett's wife,
yes.
this is a memory that I haven't shared well. What Benny knew. First race that we went to after we got married was in Talladega, Alabama, and Benny and Ned, I mean, they drove to the track together every morning. They left about 6 o'clock to get there, and he hadn't been gone more than about 30 minutes, and the phone rang in the hotel room, and it was Martha Jarrett, and I did not know Martha. And Martha said, "Terry, this is Martha Jarrett. How about just throwing some clothes on and let's go down and have breakfast?" And I said, "That would be great." So I did, and we sat down there and talked and had a really nice time. And so when Benny came back from the track, we were all changing clothes. We had to go to a cocktail party that night. And he said, "So what did you do today?" And I said, well, after you left, Martha Jarrett called me and asked me to come down for breakfast. And he just kind of froze. And I said, "Can I ask you something?" He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Out of all these drivers' wives, who was Connie the closest to?" And he said, "I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Her best friend was Martha Jarrett." And I said, "Oh, my God, that just gives me more respect for Martha, because I'm telling you right now, my best friend, I don't think would be calling somebody's new wife and inviting them to breakfast."
That gives me goosebumps.
I don't know. Yeah. So there are some wonderful, wonderful people, accepting people in racing.
Well, the good thing I think with that is that Connie passed away. You didn't. Yeah. You weren't that.
No, I never knew her. No.
Right, you weren't the second wife, you
were fooling around. With
there wasn't like a divorce. There wasn't like a divorce involved, and all of that.
That was the Jeff Gordon story at that time.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. I did not know her. We had never met or anything like that. So
when we were interviewing Ned, he told us a couple Martha stories, and it seemed to me that she was somebody kind of set in her ways, but with a good heart. So
heart of gold.
Yeah,
heart of gold.
Totally a good heart. So how cool did that feel to have?
But she never told me. To this day, she never told me that she was Connie's good friend. And I mean, that just, can you imagine how strong of a woman that took to call your best friend's new wife and oh my gosh.
That takes a hell of a woman to do that.
It does. It absolutely does.
One of the things Benny was kind of famous for was keeping secrets. And I'm not asking you to divulge secrets, but if you told him a secret, chances are it stayed a secret. And Steve Burns once put this very well. He said there's two kinds of broadcasters. There's one that hears the secrets and keeps them to themselves and just knows that person's going to respect them forever, or there's the one that blabs the secret out and you've lost all respect. So if you told Benny a secret, he'd take it to his grave with him, and he did. Drivers that were thinking about jumping ship and going with another team would call and discuss what they wanted to do or what they were considering to do with Benny, because they knew, anybody knew Benny knew he was opinionated, and you were not going to change his opinion. I don't care how hard you fought. And everybody thought Benny was this laid-back, gentle giant that was just not so opinionated, I guess. But anybody that worked with him or knew him real well would tell you opposite. They'd tell you he was fair, but he was probably the hardest person they ever worked for because he expected perfection. Well, he was that way in his personal life too, and especially with his friends. He would protect you. And I can't tell you how many drivers would come over to our house with, I don't care if they were thinking about getting a divorce or if they were going to change car teams, or even car owners that would call him and say, "What do you think about this?" Even people high ranking in NASCAR or at different speedways would call and get his opinion on things, because they knew he was going to tell them the truth. He wasn't going to waffle on it. He was going to stick to his opinion. And you talked a minute ago about Greg Biffle.
was working for ESPN, and he was going out to Tucson, Arizona every summer for the shootout, is what they called it. And it was young drivers that were up and coming, and he got a call from Jack Roush, and Jack said, Benny, is there anybody, do you see anybody that looks like they got any kind of promise out there? And he said, I do. There's this kid named Biffle that I'm telling you, he's winning everything that he can get his hands on. And I'm telling you, he's going to be somebody, Jack. So Jack decided he was going to give Biffle a try. And he called Greg. And Jack called him himself and left him a message. And Greg did not return the call. And he called him again. And Greg did not return the call. And Jack called Benny and said, what is wrong with this kid? Does he not want a chance in racing or what?
He doesn't have caller ID?
Benny, not back then. So Benny called Greg and said, what is wrong with you? And he said, oh, my God, that was really Jack Roush. I thought it was my friend screwing with me. So he said, well, I suggest you call the man back. So he called him back, and of course, and shortly after moved to Charlotte. Jack put him in a car. Greg, I mean, love him to death, and if he ever hears this, he'll choke me to death, I'm sure. But anyway,
he might.
everything that when he first was getting started, it seemed like he could hit more things than anybody you'd ever seen. And put anything on the track, he was going to hit it. Well, we were invited. We were the only people other than the crew and everybody invited to Jack's Christmas party he'd have every year. And he always had it in a fancy restaurant. And we were looking around at the name cards, and Benny walked up to me, and he said, oh, God. I said, what? He said, we're sitting next to Jack. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, Greg's destroyed every race car the man's given him this year. Do you think he's going to sit there through dinner and not rub this into me? And so we sat down next to Jack, and Jack said, Benny, before we get started, and this is the only thing I'm going to say to you, this kid better start winning something soon, or I'm going to start sending you the bill for all the sheet metal.
Yeah, Jack Roush is not a guy that suffers that kind of stuff in silence.
No.
We were just saying that earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. We were
well,
just
shortly after that, thank God, Greg started winning stuff.
And he won a lot of stuff.
So, no, but he knows the story. Benny told him. I mean, he said, thank God you started winning something, because I was going to have to start paying for your sheet metal here soon. And but the first time Greg came to our house, had two houses. We lived in Charlotte 6 months out of the year, and we lived in Daytona Beach 6 months out of the year. And when we got to Daytona, of course, they have more time. They have 2 weeks worth of stuff going on, so they have a little more free time than they do whenever they have to race in 2 days. And so Benny invited Greg over to our house for dinner. So Greg comes over to the house, and Benny said, let me go walk my dog real quick, and you talk to Terri while she's cooking, and I'll be right back. That was the longest 15 minutes of my life, because everything I said to Greg was, so, Greg, I hear you're moving to Charlotte. Yes, ma'am. Are you looking forward to it? Yes, ma'am. The only thing he could say to me for 15 solid minutes was yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Well, after I moved up here and got to know Greg better, a whole lot better, I said to Greg, God, that was the longest dinner of my life. You wouldn't talk. And he said, put yourself in my place. I was 18 years old. This famous person invited me to his house. I didn't know you, didn't know him. I didn't know what to say or why he was inviting me over. And he said, I was scared to death of both of you. And I said, oh, well, I guess that's true.
You can understand that, right?
Yeah, I can understand that.
I mean, and he's gone on to have quite a good career, and he totally gives Benny always credit.
Yeah, he does. Another one, and that's another thing. A lot of times Benny would put drivers and car owners together, and to this day, nobody would know it. If the driver wasn't telling it, he wasn't going to bring it up. But since Bill Elliott has brought this up, I can tell you this. When Benny decided after the Atlanta race, he decided he had been offered the job at ESPN for several years, and he kept saying, "No, I'm not ready to retire yet. I'm still finishing in the top 5." And he's the most consistent driver that ever did that. He was always in the top 5.
Yeah.
Always. That was the lowest he ever
He
finished.
still holds that record.
And he still does, yeah. And but he got tired of finishing in the top 5. If he wasn't going to win, he didn't want to be a part of it anymore, because if it wasn't fun, he wasn't going to do it.
He's a race car driver.
Yeah. So he got out of his race car, and he grabbed a camera guy from ESPN, and he said, "Get your boss down here now." And so the boss from ESPN, whoever that was at the time, came down and said, "What's the matter?" And Benny said, "Is that job offer still good?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Great, give me a minute." He walked over to Bill Elliott, grabbed hold of Bill, took him over to Harry Milling, and said, "Harry, meet Bill. He's the real deal. You'll hire him, because I'm going to work for ESPN. I'm done with this."
Wow.
So that is how Bill Elliott met Harry Milling.
And that's how Benny transitioned.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Exactly. And then of course at the end of the season he went to work for ESPN.
Wow.
But Benny's biggest fear, whenever he got really, really sick and he knew that he was not going to make it, his biggest fear was being forgotten.
Oh, God,
he was
no.
afraid people would forget him.
That's not going to happen.
Well,
No.
Well, not with the older group, but now we're getting with the younger group. And a lot of the people that are sitting on this voting panel for get him into the Hall of Fame, a lot of them were not around when Benny was racing. They know nothing about other than what they read in a book that they're handed to vote on. And so his biggest fear is coming true, that they're not forgetting him, they just didn't know him. The only thing that they know about him, and they've said this to me to my face, I've had people ask me, other than Buffet Benny and Hat of the Week, what did Benny Parsons do?
Oh, my God.
And that's my answer
shocked.
when they say
I'm
it.
shocked.
That's my answer. I said he's the first person to qualify over 200 miles an hour
Exactly.
in a race car.
Exactly.
Really? They don't know this stuff. So
And-
his biggest fear is happening. People are forgetting him,
No.
or they're getting younger and they don't know about him.
No, that Terry,
yeah,
that
I
is
don't
not
think so.
happening. We see this in our groups, and we have
Yeah.
like 30,000 members
we
in
do.
our groups,
Yeah.
and we see them every single year polling for Benny, because being in the Hall of Fame isn't just about your racing career, though.
Right.
21 wins, he won the Daytona 500, whatever.
Championship.
But it's all about the whole package, right? What you contribute, and he contributed so much.
He became an ambassador for NASCAR.
He did.
As the television is what gave him that platform to do that.
Yes.
Because he was invited to a whole lot more things. I mean, the Boy Scouts Club of America would have him come and do an auction for them when they were in Detroit, and it's huge. I mean, it's a huge organization. He called me one night about midnight after he had done this. He was the auctioneer for them, and they give away things. And somebody had given away tickets to the Charlotte race, but they didn't give him a place to stay, nor did they give them a way of getting there. I mean, they had to get there themselves. They had to find them a place to stay. So Benny, so this is not going to come as a surprise to you. He said, anybody in here works for an airline? Somebody raised their hand, and they said, who do you work for? U.S. Air. Great. Can you give them tickets for 2 to Charlotte? Well, what's the guy going to say? He's being put on the spot.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah. And Benny said, tell you what, if he'll fly you to Charlotte, you can stay at my house. So Benny called me to tell me that he had given away a week's stay at our house to 2 total strangers.
Oh, only a
so
woman
our
could
neighbors-
understand that.
Our neighbors kept saying, do you understand they could slit your throat in the middle of the night and steal
Exactly.
everything you had? Benny
Exactly.
said, oh, no, I don't care. So he would do things like that to help promote NASCAR. And television gave him that venue to do that. And there have been so many times that Bill Jr. would call and ask him to do favors for him, or people that own different racetracks would ask him to do favors for him. And Benny wasn't the type that was ever going to tell anybody that they did or what they asked him to do or anything like that. He just got involved and did it. And he did it because of his love for the sport, not because he wanted to be, some hero to somebody. His life was all about NASCAR. Everything we did was around NASCAR racing. I mean, we like everybody else in NASCAR, you put everything on hold for race days and qualifying days and sponsor appearances and things like that.
My husband would tell you that's the norm.
Yeah, and that's the norm. It just becomes normal.
It is.
And but he absolutely loved the sport of NASCAR. He would do anything anybody asked him to do that was going to help them better it, including the Hall of Fame. They came to him when they were going to put together the Hall of Fame. He asked them a lot of questions and made a contribution for seed money and things like everybody else did too. But the fortunate part of this story is that he made the first list of the nominees for the Hall of Fame, and he was very well alive when they called to tell him. So he knew he was on this list. He has been on the list every year since the first one. Oh. And I know this is self-serving on my part.
No, it isn't.
But I think it's about time he gets in.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, we all do.
You and every fan that is out there, we all believe it, even the new fans.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate. I cannot tell you how loyal the fans have been to him, and that was his most important thing. I remember when he was first diagnosed with cancer, we got more emails, and we'd come home from treatments all day, and I'd sit out in his office half the night trying to answer every single one of the emails that fans were sending us until it got so out of hand. There was just no way I could keep up. So Alicia Langerfeld over at PRN Radio, set up a site on the internet so that she could keep people informed, so that I didn't have to do that anymore. He knew how much fans loved him. The cancer treatments that he was going through proved to him every single day how much the fans loved him. And that meant more to him than anybody will ever know.
Terry, I admin a group called Winston Cup Racing, 1971 to 2003, and there are several fans in there, and I've helped promote it too, that every day they post, "I voted for Benny."
Right.
And there are a lot of fans out there trying to, myself included. We can't have a legitimate Hall of Fame. I told you this the other night on the phone without Benny Parsons in it, in my opinion.
Nope.
I appreciate that.
It's true,
I
though.
really do. I look at it and I think people, it's hard for me to be impartial. Like I said before, all of our friends are up to go in the Hall of Fame, and they all deserve to be in it. Don't get me wrong. They all do. And at some time or another, they will. And Benny, of all people, would not have a hard time waiting his turn to get in. But let's face it, he's been on the list since day one. And
what does that tell you? What does that tell you?
Yeah. I mean, it continues to be like that. If they didn't want him in the Hall of Fame, they shouldn't have put him on the first list or the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth or every year it just gets a little harder. And there are a lot of people that are deserving, and there are a lot of people that are going to get in the Hall of Fame. But as his wife and as knowing the things that he did that people don't know that he did.
Tell us.
I can't.
You must.
I said, he kept a lot of secrets.
You must, though. That's exactly, those kind of stories are exactly what people need to know.
He kept an awful lot of secrets that he did favors for an awful lot of people to help them out, to help get them the careers that they have today. There are people that are in the Hall of Fame now that he helped get where they are. And every single one of them has turned around to me when their name is called and said, "How did I get in before Benny?" And and that means a lot. That means a lot.
Like
that
Rusty Wallace.
Know that.
There's a perfect example right there. And Dale Jarrett.
Yeah.
Even Bill Elliott. I mean, I've voiced this very publicly.
Rusty Wallace said it on TV when he was inducted. He said, "How did I get in before Benny?"
Exactly.
And Benny didn't have anything to do with Rusty's career, but I'm godmother to Mike Wallace's son, Mike and Carla Wallace's son, Matt, and so he knows us. All the Wallaces know us extremely well, and that was awfully nice of Rusty to say that.
I've voiced very publicly on social media and on the show here before we've talked about it. That's my main jab at the Hall of Fame. I think they should have started, almost chronologically. You know what I mean? We need the pioneers. We need the pioneers. Raymond Parks needs to get in this year with him. And that's the problem I have with it. Terry Labonte, Dale Jarrett, and Rusty, even DW. And let me tell you, I was the DW fan. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
They should not be in before the ones that came before them. I think to a man, if you ask them, they would agree.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, if you had asked Benny, he would agree. That was his feeling, was that it needed to be done in chronological order, and he made no bones about telling everybody that too. But with that being said, as somebody that's been in the tourism business, that if I put myself in the place of the person, running, trying to run a place like that, you cannot put in a bunch of people that are deceased. You have nobody out there telling them about the Hall of Fame, telling the fans about the Hall of Fame, and trying to get people to come there. So you can only put in so many. This is my personal opinion. You could only put in a certain few of deceased people, whether they belong there or not.
Yep.
Because you've got to have some people that can go out and promote what you've got.
Exactly. Yep.
And I certainly understand that. Benny certainly would understand that, and everybody else does too.
Yeah.
But Benny felt the same way.
It's the way of the world, though, Terry, isn't it? Though they need to bring in a couple of old each year, right? Yeah. And then a couple new to bring all those people to the losing dollars of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I've been in the NASCAR Hall of Fame lots of times. And I love going there. I truly enjoy it.
And a certain amount of politics gets involved in everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my roundabout way of saying that.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It's true.
I'll just say it.
Well, I think this is a year for him. And if he does get in, will you induct him?
That's up to NASCAR. They'll pick whoever they want.
You don't have a say. Family. You don't have a say in that?
No.
Really?
No.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. NASCAR picks who they want to do what, and so the family will go along with whatever. Are you kidding me? We'll have Mickey Mouse induct him. I don't care who it is, as long as he gets in the Hall of Fame. It doesn't matter to me.
And you'll be there with bells on. Like he has two sons, Kevin and Keith, right?
Yes. Yes.
Keith used to be writing for Associated Press. Are they involved with NASCAR?
No, neither one of them are. Keith is a vice president of a bank over in Rockingham, North Carolina, and Kevin is a math professor and at the Richmond Community College.
Boy, they sound
also
like
in the same area, so they live close together. Yeah, and but no, now Kevin races trucks as his hobby. He'll race and has done pretty well actually. He's won quite a few races, but that's not his profession. That's what he does. That's a very expensive hobby to have, but that's what Kevin likes to do, is race trucks, and he and his wife own the trucks that he races. So, and he does that a lot during the summer, and doing a great job at doing it. But Benny tried to get both of them interested in it, and both of them had an interest in it for a while. One of Benny's surprises was when Kevin came to him and said, "Dad, I think I'm going to try my hand at truck racing." And that wasn't until several years later. And Kevin realized he had passed the age limit by then that NASCAR would, or sprint car people would be looking at to be putting in a car. So he doesn't have that kind of ambition. He likes racing the trucks.
What would you think Benny would think of today's NASCAR racing?
Well, that's a big one.
I know it is. So let me narrow
Benny
it
would
down
always
a little bit.
Benny would always surprise me because you would think he'd be set in his ways and like things the way they used to be and all that kind of thing. He liked to see change. He liked to see things change up enough that would stay up with the times and keep people interested and trying to bring in youth members. I know that he also he did not like the way that he felt that NASCAR was eliminating a lot of the older race fans, the loyal ones that had been with the sport for so many years, that they were losing by making so many changes. But I don't know how he'd feel about it now. But I do know he liked changes.
Yeah, but he was always very accessible, and nowadays it's pretty hard to get even remotely close.
Oh, he wouldn't like that. That's for sure.
No, and Ed Hines' thing that you're going to at Pat Rogers will make some of those guys a little more accessible. But I think Benny would have hated that. I really do.
And I do too. And the drivers that you will see that will show up over at Pat Rogers will be the ones that think the same way that you and I do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Junior Johnsons, the Bobby Allisons, the. Mm-hmm. And Ed says there's going to be a couple of surprises. Well, we'll see. But though, I was at a event recently, and I think it was Dale Jr. came in, and he came in on a helicopter, landed for, like 30 seconds, answered one question, and away he went. That is part of, I think, what Benny would have hated about NASCAR, and something that we've talked to Francis Flock and lots of other drivers and crew chiefs and what have you over the years, and the things that people totally comment on consistently are the lack of accessibility, I guess you could say.
Yes.
With people, the ability to reach out and say, you know what, I really like you. Can I have your autograph?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah,
you're bringing your kids to a race, and yet you buy things, and I mean it's not cheap today, but people still sacrifice, and they do that, and I'll see that at Pocono in June, and I see a lot of families there, and I know how much it costs them to buy that shirt and that hat. It used to be that you could stand there and your kid's stuff would get signed. Mm-hmm. And when I was a kid, it was even at the ballpark where my grandfather worked, and he always made sure the Orioles always stayed after a game to do that. And I don't get that feeling today, and you don't see it. I'll tell you who still does it. Kurt Busch will come out, and he'll sign stuff, and he'll be there for as long as it takes for that line to go down. There's something
Kurt came
about
up here. Yeah, Kurt came up here the night before we opened the wine tasting room and vineyard. Kurt Busch came up here, and I had no idea he was even coming. I'll tell you something else that someone did that totally surprised me. I told you earlier that Benny left me a list of 10 things to get done on his behalf.
What are those other
I've
8?
I've gotten 9 done. Number 3, I don't know if I'll ever get that done or not. It's killing me. And my house got struck by lightning one night up here. I mean, burnt to the ground.
I can relate to that.
I lived in a hotel for 2 years, and I swore the lightning was Benny's sign to quit spending his money on something that wasn't going to get done. But it was opening the North Wilkesboro Speedway. And,
I knew that's what you would say, yeah.
And I had spent a ton of Benny's money trying to help different people get the place open. And anyway, I called different shops and talked to different car owners and said, please send somebody up just to test the track. Just give us a little press here that the track is not as in bad a shape as everybody thinks it is. Do you know who came?
Kurt Busch.
No. Take a guess.
Jeff Gordon.
Jeff Gordon.
No. Take a guess.
Joey Logano. He loves history. Or Dale Jr. They both do.
No.
Ooh.
Yeah. Keselowski. He's another history lover.
No.
Nope.
Oh,
Okay, so it has to be one of the older guys then.
No. Kevin Harvick.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
He
no, it
showed up.
should surprise
Car-
us. Yeah.
That
Car,
surprised
crew, everything. He came up here and
Oh, good
tested
for him.
and had his cell phone with him, texting people. And get this, going around the track at 180 miles an hour. You know, he's texting people, all of his friends, Dale Jr. and Martin Truex. Guess where I am? I'm the first person to go around this track since it closed, and here's a video of it. And he pulled in, and I said, what are you doing? Give me that phone before you get killed, and I get blamed for it.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, but he did. He tried to help us get this track, or at least get people to look at this track
I did not know that.
for what it was, and that's been a few years back now, but he tried to help us.
What are some of those other things on Benny's list?
What were they? Oh, he wanted me to get involved with the Chamber of Commerce and help them with tourism. And I thought I was doing that with the Moonshiner and Revenuers reunion, but nobody wanted to help me. They said, oh, no, you're in the Bible Belt. We're not doing any Moonshiners reunion for anything. And I said, well, guess what? I don't need anybody's permission. I own 200 acres up there that I can have a private party on anytime I want. And I'll invite the police to come so that they can see that we're not teaching people how to make moonshine. We did have Junior helped us build a still, and we had all kinds of props and things all over the place that people could see. And we let the moonshiners sell books that they had written, and the Revenuers sell books that they had written, and so both sides were they were telling things as they knew. The biggest surprise at that was we had invited, of course, a lot of the retired drivers and stuff. And, of course, they were all stood around and talking, and a lot of the current people that are in television and radio were there, too. In fact, MRN broadcasted live from here. ESPN did, too, and so did Fox. And the biggest surprise of all was the drivers did not want to leave after the thing was over because they never got a chance to talk at any of the racetracks without a sponsor's name on their back, without somebody around listening. They didn't have any time to sit and just talk and tell old stories and things that they wanted to do. So for them, this was their private affair, that they could just be themselves. And nobody had to wear anybody's name on their back. Nobody had to do anything. And then, like I told you earlier, we auctioned off those rocking chairs at the end for the money going to Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And then every year we picked a different charity to auction the chairs off for. And come to find out, we had Ray Evernham was bidding against Kevin Harvick on this one rocking chair that the price got out of sight. They were in the thousands of dollar range, and I finally said to Kevin, you bidding against Ray Evernham over here? And he said, I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. And they're bidding against each other because nobody had on any sponsor name. Nobody knew who each other was. They didn't even recognize each other. But they stayed around after it was over again, just so they could sit and talk to each other as people instead of, just a moment here, a moment there, stolen at a racetrack.
How happy must that make you feel to see that sort of thing going on, right?
Well, I didn't realize it was going on. I thought they all knew each other and everybody was best friends, and they'd wreck each other and get in the car and call each other on the cell phone and apologize, until a couple of them told me, this is great for us. I've known Terry for years, but I never knew Terry Labonte until I got a chance to sit and talk to him for an hour. And so, yeah, I mean,
and you brought them all together.
Well, yeah, but
you did.
I
don't sell yourself short.
I was just trying to get this small community to understand that they helped make a sport. They helped create a sport called NASCAR. And it was time for them to stand up and take the rightful place instead of letting all these other states and towns stand up and talk about how they helped NASCAR. And we're sitting right here with the first track that was ever sanctioned as a NASCAR track sitting out there that should be a historical landmark. And if it wasn't for Save the Speedway Foundation, that never would have happened.
There's a lot of talk on the social media groups about Wilkesboro, and one of the things that always comes up, and you seem to be the perfect person to ask, how feasible would it be? Because it's probably not looking like they're going to be able to ever run a racetrack there, another race there. But how feasible would it be to turn it into some sort of museum?
Personally, I think it would be very easy to turn it into a sort of museum, and I still say races can be run there. Maybe not a NASCAR race.
Right.
Or if a NASCAR race, it would be a truck race. It is not as in bad a condition that people think it is. When we had it open a few years back, even the mayor of North Wilkesboro, who owns an electric company, went out and personally donated his time, his money, and his company to bringing the place up to code. Bruton Smith is the owner of the Speedway. He has been nothing but cooperative with people that want to use it for movies, and I'm the film commissioner here for movies and television things. So I work with Janet Kirkley, who is Bruton's right-hand girl, and they have been nothing but cooperative with us, and we're all on the same page. Bruton is willing to sell the track, but he's tired of all these con men that show up, and we seem to have a magnet on us that says, I mean, we've heard, just in the length of time I've been here, I've had a guy that wanted to put a Space Needle in the middle of it with a restaurant that rotated on top. Now, come on. We've had people wanting to turn a water park in the middle of it. I mean, you name the story, I've heard it, and I could probably blow you out of the water with some of the stories that we've heard. And we're talking about maybe 50 to 100 people, just in the course since I've been here since 2007. And nobody wants a con man to come and buy this track. Nobody wants to get involved with any of that anymore. Only serious people. But yes, it is a historical site. Yes, it can be a historical site and still have races run on it, but at a smaller level. A smaller level as far as races go, and we've had some of that.
I'm glad you brought up the Bruton Smith part of it, because that's another thing you see a lot of on the social media. Whenever North Wilkesboro is brought up, Bruton's made out to be the demon and the devil in the matter. And I'm glad you said what you said, because a lot of people don't know that he is open and willing.
Where that came from was from years and years ago, a long time before I got here. We had some people that were on the Wilkes County Commission. And when Bruton had gone before them asking them to do something, they all got in a shouting match, and Bruton decided to close it down. And he said, I'll let it go to the ground before I'll do anything about it. Well, that was quite a few years ago. And Bruton doesn't want to see this thing go down to the ground. He wants only the best for it, but he wants the best for it through the right people. And I think Bruton is, back then, yeah, they were all in a shouting match, and Bruton didn't get over it. Bruton doesn't get over things very easily. We all know that, and we can't blame him. But the people that were on the county commission then, and that were on these town councils then, they're long gone, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody on any elected official that would tell you that this speedway is not important, deathly important to Wilkes County. And times have changed. Times have changed.
Like you just said, though, on a smaller scale, they could start with, say, some K&N, maybe ARCA,
yes.
And even I think Wilkesboro would support a weekly late model race.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have. I mean, we did that when we had it open for 2 years. And they went very well. But we were told before, we even wanted to try to get NASCAR to think about us for a truck race. And we were told, because we do not have soft walls, that they would not consider that. Well, we, as the town, can't go in and put soft walls. We don't own it. Bruton Smith owns it. Well, Bruton's not going to put a lot of money into something that he's trying to sell. So it's going to take the right person with the right heart and the right means of what they want to do with it. We don't want somebody to come in and buy it and decide they're going to tear it down and build a shopping mall. We had that happen too. We had a guy come say they wanted to buy it and turn it into a shopping mall. Bruton doesn't want that to happen. We're all on the same page here. All the elected officials here, everybody involved with the Speedway, and the only reason why I'm involved with it at all is because of who I was married to, because I'm here now, because Charlotte is a good hour and a half away. It's easier for me to work with them and tell them who wants to use it and what they want to do with it, and them say yes or no, than it is for them to keep somebody on the road constantly running up back and forth here, wanting to do things. Every time I've called and asked them if a commercial can be filmed there or a movie can be done there, they've never told me no. Never.
Junior they just filmed something I saw on TV with Junior. Junior was there at the racetrack.
Yeah. And the other part was at my house.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah, that's coming up for airtime soon, right?
Yeah. They have. It was played once before, but they're going to getting ready to do it again. But the first part of it was done up here at my house, and they ESPN Productions did it, and they brought a drone. And so it was kind of nice to see my house from overhead.
And
part of it was done here, and part of it was done out at the Speedway.
And it sounds to me like you're still pretty heavily involved in NASCAR.
Yeah, I served on the Governor's Advisory Council for Motorsports for 8 years, and try to stay as involved as I can. And I do that for Benny, for his memory, and because that was his life, and that was what that's what he lived for. He lived for NASCAR. And the only thing he wanted to do when he got so sick was he didn't care if he had to crawl to get to a racetrack. He was going to be in that broadcast booth as much as he could to broadcast a race. It meant that much to him that his fans knew that he was committed. And Rick Hendrick helped him make that dream come true. Rick flew him back and forth to make sure that he could do what he wanted to do.
You've mentioned a lot of big names that have helped you over the years. Mm-hmm. It's huge. And I don't think a lot of fans realize how much those guys do behind the scenes. And thank you for sharing that. That
Well, it would have been very easy for them all just to say, well, Benny's gone. We don't have to do anything to help her, and she's on her own. I don't think people understand when people say NASCAR is a family. NASCAR is really a family.
Oh, it's huge family.
They take care of their own. They make sure everybody is okay. There's not a week that goes by somebody from NASCAR doesn't call me just to say hi or to see if there's anything I need. Mike Helton, I get a letter from Mike Helton once a year. It's amazing how they take care of their own. Just because somebody passed away, they stay in touch with the widows and and they help as much as they can. But so I know NASCAR gets bad raps for a lot of things, and I know Bruton, for God's sake, has gotten really beat up over North Wilkesboro Speedway.
He does.
And I can honestly just tell you my feelings. Back then, I would have felt the same way he did when all that was going on here. But those people aren't even here anymore, and Bruton has done nothing but help us here. Nothing but help us.
I think he's a pretty good ambassador.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you? Oh, yeah. Where do you see yourself in the future? Like what do you see your future life being in the next 10 years?
Where do I see me, or my advice?
You personally.
Well,
that's, I know, a big question.
I hate to say this, but what I plan on doing, I mean, this I don't know if you've seen this house that Benny built.
I saw it. I saw it.
I do mean
huge.
Benny built it. This house was built only with people from Wilkes County. The builder was from Wilkes County. Everybody that touched this house, everything that's in it came from Wilkes County. That was one thing he wanted to do, was bring jobs back to Wilkes County. It's 8,000 square feet.
Oh God, that's a lot of house
There
cleaning.
is just me living here.
No.
And a vineyard. I've just recently developed some health issues of my own, and I plan on selling this house, not the land and things that go on down the street and everything. I'm just the land that the house and the vineyard is on, and moving back to Daytona Beach, where I'm from, so that I can be closer to my family. I lived in Charlotte and lived here, and for me now it's time to go home. I just need to be closer to my family now.
Well,
and as much as I hate to do it.
No, you're at that age, hon. We totally get that.
Yeah, as much as I love this house, I mean, I have beds nobody's ever even slept in before. Mm-hmm. The Dale Earnhardt Senior's interior decorator made every stick of furniture in this house. It's a very, very expensive house, and it's very expensive to keep up. And I just need to get back close to my family. So sometime within the next couple of years, that's my plan.
Interesting. And do you think that his family will take it over, or do you think somebody else will?
No, I think somebody else will.
Well, I totally get that. And Maureen, you can relate to this. We're both well up in our 50s. Maureen's about to have a big birthday.
Sounds like we're all pretty close in age here.
We are. Well, Buddy's a youngin', but there comes a time where you have to move on, right? You have to. You have to move on, and you have to, accept what's happened, and time has passed, and get back to your roots.
Well, it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. And Benny would have thought I was nuts for staying in a house this big for 10 years by myself anyway. And I'm also in the middle of nowhere, and I literally mean in the middle of nowhere. And people are surprised when they come up here, like when the film crew came up with Junior.
You're way out.
I'm way out, and I'm on top of a mountain. And, people worry about me being out here by myself a lot.
Yeah, that's a long ways away.
But believe me, this is a very safe place to live.
Absolutely.
Very safe place to
Absolutely.
live. A lot of good people live here.
Well, you know what? I hope that you're still there a year from now.
I probably will be a year from now. I'll probably still be here.
Buddy and Maureen and I are anticipating a sort of a reunion of sorts, I guess.
Well, come on up.
Reunion maybe is a bad word, but we've never all met. And I've told them to come to Charlotte, and I'll rent a car, and I will drag them all over the country to all these people that we talk to on our radio podcasts. And you are number one on our list. And I want.
Oh, weren't you sweet? That's
I want to take them up there to meet you and well, because I'm a wino, right? I live right between two vineyards. I
know everybody I know is a wino. So hey.
Yeah. You know what I was so excited about, Terry, was when if you buy, people always say to me, why do you buy sweet passes? Well, it's so I can have wine. I buy sweet passes strictly so I can have wine. Because I'm not a beer drinker, I can have one beer and, it's like whatever. But I really prefer to drink wine, and I prefer...
Well, I think Benny didn't get into the wine stuff. I mean, he wasn't much of a drinker. He'd have like a glass of wine with dinner if we went out with people or whatever. But I don't think he developed an interest in wine until he started doing movies and television and all of this, because of the people he was traveling around with from New York and California. They are all big wine connoisseurs. And, of course, then Richard Childress.
I hardly call myself a connoisseur, but I just like drinking wine. I'm not a snob by any means.
Yeah, well,
sometimes I drink my wine out of a box, and people tease me that I need a box cutter to get my wine out.
Oh yeah. Well, with ours, Benny worked with our winemaker. I mean, and we'd be there at 5:30 in the morning tasting wine, if you can imagine that.
No,
and
I can't actually.
So, but he Benny worked on all the wines, and his favorite were all the reds. And I noticed in the beginning you said that I would win the medal for the women in wine,
yes.
which is true.
Yes.
But we also won 21 other medals, which would flip Benny out. He would never believe that.
And that's very cool. Are y'all red wine?
No. The biggest thing was that we were up against. Like I said, I had a lady that worked for me that was our wine room manager that came from California, knew more about wine than I'd ever known in a lifetime. And she would enter us in all these different contests. Well, she entered one. Most wine snobs kind of turn their nose up at rosés. And she entered ours in California, which we thought, oh, my God, what a joke. Like California is going to...
Yeah.
And we ended up being the first North Carolina wine in a rosé category to win a California medal.
Oh, that's awesome.
So all these medals, I mean, I can contribute to Denise Kent, who, I mean, she picked out what we were going to enter and where we were going to enter it. But Benny he liked Merlots and the Cab Franc, and our Cab Franc turned out to be a wonderful one that kept winning everything. But like I said, he worked with our winemaker. I picked out the bottles, all except for one. He had to have this one that was made in Italy and only fit 2 machines in the United States that cost a fortune to bottle. So, I mean, that was Benny's taste. He had a lot more expensive taste than I did. And but anyway, he picked out the bottles, and I designed the corks. But his youngest son, the one that used to be the writer for the Associated Press, he wrote the label on the back. He wrote the legend on the back. So even the bottles was a family affair. And I designed the label. And
I was so regretful that I didn't get that wine. But what are you going to say when Carol Shelby's betting against you, right?
Yeah. Well,
guy's got more money than God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've had a lot of Canadian race fans that wanted us to ship, and that was one place we just couldn't do it. We probably could have, but we'd all end up in jail. So.
Yeah. We did. We just can't buy wine and import it up here. It just doesn't happen. But when Buddy and Maureen and I meet up next year in Charlotte, we're going to go up to your vineyard and we're going to have some wine.
Call me when you get there. You got the number.
Absolutely.
You got the secret number, so call me when you get there.
We got the secret number. We know the password.
You got it. You got it.
I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this. I knew I was going to. It went without saying, because you are a woman that's involved right from the get-go. You're involved with Benny's career. You appreciate what people believe and how beloved he was by the fans. I mean, he was one of my favorites, and I know Buddy and Maureen feel the same way about this. And so do so many others. He's a treasure,
Mm-hmm.
He really is.
Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you this. What you saw on TV and the personality that you saw on TV, that's exactly what he was.
I can hear Benny right now when Sterling got out of that car at Daytona. You can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that. What are you doing?
Right, saying that.
Whatever he thought came right out of his mouth.
You know what? And that was refreshing. That was so refreshing. And he was such a big teddy bear. You know, he was such. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in your new adventures, because at some point in time you have to move on. And you know, I get that. I really.
Well, you have to move on. I'm not going that far away. I'm going right to the seat of NASCAR. So how far away am I really getting?
Yeah.
You know.
You know what? I just spent 2 weeks down in Daytona, and I would have loved to have gone to the breakfast joint with you and hung out for a while. That would have been so
Well, there
cool.
you go. We can do that too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well,
we can do that too.
I have to totally thank you for being so frank and giving us all those good stories that people don't know. You know, that's the really cool part of this, is people don't know those stories. So thank you, Terri, for sharing those with us.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
Yeah, when Benny gets in the Hall of Fame, you come back and talk to us again. And I'm going to apologize for Maureen. Her electric went out about 20 minutes ago, so she's not with us.
We kind of knew that was going to happen, so we're not really surprised by that. But
keep your fingers crossed. Keep your fingers crossed, and just keep reminding people to vote for him, and we're in good shape.
I sure will.
We hope you've enjoyed hanging out in the Happy Hour Garage. Thanks for tuning in. Please join Shannon and Maureen next week for another episode of NASCAR news, interviews, and stories. Check out our website at www.happyhourgarage.com for our previous shows and see what's coming up next.